Arc 6, The Corridor of Memories. Chapter 83, Ram. She remembered anything and everything being scorched, engulfed in red, scarlet flames. The decadencing days, calm and stagnant, met an abrupt end. Before that insanic violence, even the title of strongest demi-humans, even the position of the most feared headman in the village, even the ubiquitous love of parents who protected their child, all held no purport. It was regrettable that she had been late to take notice of the slaughter's rampancy. No, this time, perhaps the tactfulness of the opponent was worthy of praise. They were detested, shunned, ostracized by the world. Therefore, they lurked in darkness, erased their presence, silenced their noise, and had knowledge of techniques to draw near unnoticed. It would be correct to say that at the point of the first ambush, victory and defeat had already been incised. Faint quiescence was mingled into the atmospheric mana. By the time her horn had sensed that aberration, it had already been far too late. First, half of the village persons had been retrenched initially, leaving less than half of those capable of battle. Adding to that, further half of those had not come about, due to the exigent nature of pondering whether they had been mistaken. To summarize, their hearts had been putrefied by peace and harmony. The Oni clan, once named as the strongest demi-humans, even said to have been capable of bringing about change in the state of affairs of the kingdom of Lugnica if they had taken part in the demi-human war, even had the if of that history occurred for the argument's sake, the Oni clan unmistakably wouldn't have bore great results either. Anyhow, the half that had been abetted by the first assault were further reduced to another half by the following second assault. By that point, blazes arose throughout the village. By the time death wails resounded into the night sky illuminated scarlet, all of the Onis in the village had inferred the aberration. However, in those moments, only two had perceived so much as the fall of the Oni clan. Ram! Break out of the siege. It's fine as long as you alone stay alive. With two enlarged gigantic horns, her elder cried with all muscles of his body bulked up. Her elder, carrying the longsword he specialized in, leapt out of the room, and vented that at Ram, as she slashed the ordinary combatants down using wind. Telling her to stay alive, but that was not because he possessed disquietude regarding Ram. For it had been her elder who believed with the greatest undiscerning honesty that Ram herself was the promising, dazzling, gleaming future of the Oni clan. The reincarnation of the former glory of the Oni clan, the Oni god who had advanced domination and conquest in the era of the witch. That was the role expected of the prodigy named Ram, and must have been his ardent wish as the final patriarch of the Oni clan, which had all but forgotten battling. Ha hook! She felt like laughing it off with an exhale, finding it to be just ludicrous. Even in this age, did the wish of the Oni who represented the village refer to entrusting the realization of an impossible dream to the future? He could nimbly consolidate his comrades, attempt to launch a counterattack at the enemy. The options he possessed for taking action were countless. However, Ram did not intend to offer that as advice to the patriarch. This night was not the cause. For Ram had already, since a long time in the past, turned her back towards her tribe. Something like the glory of the Onis. Worthless. 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 Even the reality that the purest blood of that Oni clan was flowing within her was repulsive. Certainly, upon wishing for strength her blood boiled, enhancement reigned over her entire body, a sense of omnipotence as if the entirety of all and everything existed for her sake appeased her. The truth was that had Ram grown into adulthood healthily, then that sense of omnipotence might have become genuine. However, Ram did not wish for that. Within this confined world, rather than putting on airs as the child of God, Ram had a future she seeked to choose. It was, instead of being lionized as the reincarnation of the Oni god etc., instead of spending her lifetime as a shrine for her blood relatives who resumed to cling to a glory already met by ruin, something possessing far more worth. It was, to live as the, of. Centralizing her attention to her forehead, she encompassed the mana scintillating with heat into her entire body through her white horn. Upon praying for it with might, Ram's perception greatly, immensely magnified, hijacking the field of vision of all that was breathing and living in her environs, she grasped all happenings of the confined village with perfection. The number of enemies was large, and they had taken positions encircling the village ensuring escape was improbable. Correspondence at the first instance had been delayed, the only ones who had been able to oppose properly were the half of half, and they too had lost numbers such that the remaining ones could be counted on one hand, indicating the exhaustion of the Oni clan spirit. One person, the elder, seemed to be making strenuous efforts in battling, but the enemies who had assembled there were quite well trained. The traces of the elder, as he fell into disadvantage, were enveloped in rich death. Cladding her small body in wind, Ram bolted through the village as if a gale. What those lips announced referred to her one and only, whom she loved even within the slightest thought. This was not Ram's heartlessness. She was simply renewing her consciousness. For Ram's parents had been within the first half of people assaulted, and no longer had any hope of their lives being saved. Never had she detested her parents. However, both of them, for better or worse, had been born into this village, had been members of the Oni clan who chose to die within this village, and had unmindfully accepted a rather lenient parish was what she believed. Hence, for them to lose their lives on this night was a certain kind of inevitability. However, this does not mean they will not be avenged. The black shadow obstructing her way, the enemy with its entire frame clad in a robe. Towards the underlings wielding and romping with the cross-shaped daggers, Ram delivered an unfaltering wind. Whether they had made light of her as a mere child, or if they simply lacked ability. Failing to accept Ram's wind blades, the black shadows proceeded to be slashed down from one to the next, giving an atrocious rise to dead bodies in great count. Even then, Ram enveloped herself in wind and resumed her slaughter, as if dancing within the flares. Should it be likened to, then perhaps it had indeed appeared as if a glamorous pirouette. However, in reality, with the swing of an arm Ram robbed life, and each time she made what had shaped disappear, dark joy cried for exultation through her youthful mind. Kill more, so it howled, vehemently. Her inner oneself urged her to pillage blood, flesh, bones, soul, life. This evening was not the first time she had lent her ears to that appeal. Since in the distant past, since the moment she had taken birth, precisely this voice allured her upon the slightest interlude. It sought the awakening of her inner oneself, apprising her to entrust her life, to her blood, her flesh, her bones, her soul. It appealed to her that she could kill far more, that she could destroy far more. Ram seemingly couldn't comprehend about simply what was so wonderful about this. Neither the elder nor her parents, no one, could comprehend this. Ram did not even feel inclined towards conveying about this to those who sought of her a duty which departed from her being Ram. It appeared as if she was being controlled by her horn. Had she not possessed a firm self, her youthful persona would have gotten easily swallowed, demolished, and precisely then she surely would have become the reincarnation of the Oni god in accordance with the desires of her surroundings. However, she did not become that way. The reason being, Shan. Called by a shrill voice, upon turning back there she saw, irradiated by the blaze. During that instant, a surging wind dispelled the obstructive crowd of black shadows away, blowing them away into fragments in one go. And, making haste, Ram headed to. Gaze pervaded with fright, with no strength in legs, had collapsed at that spot. Extending her hand to her beloved, she helped stand up. In accordance with the elder's wish, Ram must survive. However, not by herself, but together with. That had been the instant. Ascertaining as safety, for but a moment, she let her guard down. By the time she took notice of the presences, she had been encircled, a situation arduous to make even an escape route through. By herself, it would not be impossible. However, if she alone were to survive, then that would be no different from dying. She possessed no choice but to, come what may, break through the situation. For that purpose, she shall unfasten all shackles sealing her might, and impel an enraged wind towards the enemy. That must have been an interval within her heart, sired by the sense of omnipotence she abhorred. The black shadow slipped through the blades of wind, the single burnish it fired tenaciously afflicted her forehead, her field of vision fulminating. Reclining due to the enormous impact, whilst tasting an excruciating sense of loss, Ram gazed. Steadily, swiveling, towards the scarlet night illuminated by the blaze scorching the village to knout, gyrating, a white horn sword. Apprehending that was her own horn, her slim throat gave way to a screech, begotten by agony and sense of loss. Whilst screeching, however, alongside, Ram detected. Ever since she had been born, that voice which continued to eat into Ram had become inaudible. Ah, so it was something that simple, she thought, being amused by her own imbecility. Whilst watching the horn paint a parabola into the scarlet night. Ah, it finally broke. So spoke her mind. Devoutly, fervidly, the black earth dragon absconded from the field of vision she shared through clairvoyance. On its back was the young girl, bound to be Ram's cherished other half. One of her wings, unremembered, absent, having bequeathed merely a gaping void of loss. Ram. Apprehending what meaning this held, Ram's heart tremored with rage. Though exasperating to admit, Ram had managed to regain a part of her strength of heyday owing to Subaru's cooperation, and that potency had overpowered the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, Labat and Katos, slowly cornering him into disadvantage. Ram herself could affirm that in terms of simply killing him, she had attained a countless amount of opportunities. However, the vexatious authority he had been endowed with, the existence of the power and ability to eat the memories and name of the opponent made Ram hesitate in imprudently taking the life of that blasphemer. A judgment compelled by, not kindliness, but necessity. But, the result remained the way it was, the result. Resultantly, Baton Kaitos freely utilized his authority and made a safe escape before Ram, and with the same momentum, headed to secure Rem's person, Ram's other half. His aim was obvious because he possessed conviction that he shan't win, even if he were to uprightly battle Ram. Fighting face to face, and upon the instance of discerning drawback, withdrawing and altering the way of action. Sin archbishops were no warriors. They were existences who acted with avarice for the sole purpose of fulfilling their own desires, possessing not a single reason to be concerned with what path ought to be taken for victory. Thus, he plotted revenge against Ram, who had made him taste humiliation, and to further curtail the time limit placed onto the hornless Ram using Rem's memories which he had stolen as basis. Infuriatingly, that strategy was the optimum solution. Should he seize and gain control of Rem's person, he could incapacitate Ram with ease. Even should that not be, should he buy any more time, then this camp's war potential would suffer an immense loss. With the flow of time, her chances of victory diminished. Hence, Ram must catch up to Patrash as soon as possible. Fortunately, Patrash, whom Rem had been entrusted to, was a ground dragon so intelligent, it could be said that amongst the battle array assembled within this tower, it was second only to Julius. Subaru and Beatrice had foibles, and Echidna and Melee had far too many unknown aspects to them. Those like Amelia, who brandished an air of being unreliable, were outrageous. And though complicated, Baton Kaitos was evidently tormenting Patrash. Despite being capable of running it down in an instant at simply the thought of running it down, Baton Kaitos had intentionally waned his onslaught, cultivating an interval through his pursuit, and had been taking joy in a hunt emaciating his prey. All for the sake of sharing his field of vision, and scorching this spectacle into Ram's memory. She could no longer allow him to take any further arbitrary action as per he pleased. Ram, ah! It had been the moment she was enveloping herself in wind, seeking to break into a sprint. Her field of vision, aiming for the floor above the spiral staircase, obfuscated, and for an instant, clairvoyance came undone. Whilst maintaining the projection of Baton Kaitos' field of vision in her right eye, preserving her own field of vision in her left eye, the scenery blurred further. That was not all. The heavy exhaustion she could not feel till now, and the jip and affliction as if her organs were being churned by an invisible hand, descended upon Ram herself. That was, indubitably, the effect of weariness Ram was ordinarily made to taste. What Subaru a bombast he shall take over through some kind of an authority, the indemnification bound to eternally eat into the hornless rammet, rebounded towards Ram. What dawned upon her forthwith, was the possibility of Subaru having died, vainly and uncouthly. However, she could judge that wasn't the case due to the lightness of the burden rebounding onto Ram. Though merely for a few minutes, taking the might Ram had brought forth into account, its indemnification shan't be this meager. It was supposed to be such agony that it should be no peculiarity even if she were to literally vomit blood and oscillate. The fact that had not occurred, though an unforeseen circumstance had taken shape, implied Subaru had not unreservedly withdrawn from the warfront. Otherwise, a progression of events entirely contrasting the occurred happenings also came to her mind. Namely, a disaster which Subaru was obliged to take up had occurred onto someone else's body, beyond the burden of Ram's body. Ram, Beatrice Sama or Melee, Knight Julius. Her mind drifted in that direction, but affirming that answer held no significance. What was momentous was that it had now become onerous for Ram to bring forth the might akin to what she had earlier, which had succeeded in overpowering Baton Kaitos. In terms of shackles, merely one was unfastened. Should she strain herself, it would be feasible for her to unfasten the second one, though the two couldn't be persevered for more than a few tenfold of seconds. Thus, in this plight, would she truly even be able to win against lay Baton Kaitos? Ram, why become so weak-kneed? There is no choice but to follow the plan for winning. Even whilst she was spending her time this way, the possibility of her camp's victory continued to be diminished. Now for once, nearly missing her step, Ram stepped on the steps and darted upwards of the spiral staircase. Whilst feeling the void of absence throb, sensing as if she had also, in the past, whilst panting, chased after her younger sister being pursued, just like this. Dota Jayuan. Ha ha. Truly, it sure is nice. You sure are doing your best holding out, despite being just a ground dragon, ha. Whilst continuing to lacerate its scales through the casted daggers, he commended the black ground dragon scampering through the narrow aisle. It was bleeding through the slashed and gouged wounds, painful to even look at. However, the ground dragon decisively made a prudent escape, completely discarding its own conditions for victory. The divine protection of wind evasion was a hallmark belonging to all species of ground dragons. As long as the ground dragon resumed running, a large part of the adversity of external factors such as wind or footholding was nullified, affirming the deed of running in order to achieve an objective. Its grace also subsumed the carriage fastened to the ground dragon, or its rider. In other words, the reason why the Sleeping Beauty, in an unconscious state, bound and fastened to its saddle had not been ejected off yet, mostly owed to the influence of the divine protection of wind evasion. Had it been absent, the Sleeping Beauty surely would have already fallen into the hands of Batten Kaitos. Lay, amazing, gallant Sue. Despite all the hindrances done here and there in your dash so far, you sure have the nerve to still not halt your feet and keep holding out. Well, if you halt your feet, then the divine protection of wind evasion will be rescinded, and we get the reason why you'd be so desperate, but you know. Dota Jayuan. Lay, ground dragons, aren't they nice? They're indefatigable, and are devoted to their masters. Surely, had you been a human, we think you would have certainly made for one mouth-watering platter for us of gourmet Sue. But. Though lamentable, our stomach can't get filled by a ground dragon Sue. In possession of will, in possession of a soul, in possession of memories, in possession of a name. Nevertheless, the authority of gluttony couldn't eat that, belonging to all which nowise was human. Thus, Batten Kaitos could not adore and cherish the ground dragon directly confronting an enemy onerous to oppose with such desperation and earnestness, through what was the greatest medium of doing so for himself. Despite him drooling over simply how delicious it seemed, he could not eat it. That was, as though a meal illustrated onto a painting with the utmost supreme paintbrush. Rice cakes illustrated onto a picture couldn't be eaten, though a phraseology like that did seem as if something he had come across. Lay, that's it. That's completely it. When the stomach is feeling so hungry and nothing can be done Sue. Something like the drawing of food this delicious looking is just letting live and then killing. Isn't this completely what's called child abuse Sue? Whilst resuming his pursuit of the sprinting ground dragon, he spouted the clot of blood clogged within his nose. In the immediately previous battle, his face had suffered damage, and his left eyeball was gurgling as if its retina had been shattered. His fangs marred, his tongue torn, blood ceaselessly cascaded down to his jaw, but none of it mattered. Contemplating that Ram, at present, was viewing this spectacle, his deepermost heart pulsated. Lay, Ne-sama is pure, noble, perfect, an impeccable being concocted devoid of flaws. That was what the memories slumbering within Batten Kaitos implored, and also believably his rational appraisal after having been half-killed, unable to undertake any resistance. Against a serious Ram, Batten Kaitos shan't be able to compete. No, plausibly, whichever Sin Archbishop may it be, they would all get easily killed with a twist of serious Ram's finger. Though possibly Regulus, he might have been able to put up a fight due to the absolute nature of his authority. Lay, well, there's no way that idiot could kill Ne-sama anyway, you know? At most, if she couldn't kill him then she wouldn't have killed him, but ended it by just dropping him down the great waterfall or something, isn't it? Even without having to kill, there existed countless ways of confinement. Precisely how the Witch of Envy failed to die even to the hands of the three heroes, and was imprisoned in the evil Sealing Stone Shrine at present as well. In other words, no matter what. Lay, for providing hospitality to the greatest, perfect Ne-sama, we must arrange for suitable preparation as well or it'll be quite rude is what it's about you know. Dilating his unsteady left eye, Batten Kaitos expressed a melancholic smile dripping blood. Though the ground dragon's velocity was considerable, indoors it was merely inutile treasure. Much less, since Batten Kaitos was capable of chauffeuring across space through a method of traipsing making practical use of memories throughout times, even entirely nullifying the distance opened in between. Lay, as Ne-sama's little sister, must grow up without any embarrassment. With a rising sense of purpose seated in his chest, Batten Kaitos hauled the memories in the depths of oneself. The authority of gluttony, in its types, existed an ability called eclipse. It could concisely be classified into two parts, solar eclipse and lunar eclipse, but its use was extraordinarily difficult. Lunar eclipse was a phenomenon wherein the moon was visible as waned. On one hand, it referred to hauling out the memories of the eaten opponents, and recreating them in Batten Kaitos' own flesh body. Normally, Batten Kaitos' browsing multifarious memories, combining them, and practically utilizing them as a hyper-level synthesis, could be stated as this lunar eclipse's specialty. On the other hand, solar eclipse was a phenomenon wherein the sun was visible as waned. Denoting here, a technique wherein not simply the memories of eaten opponents, but to cover oneself with their existence itself, utilizing them in accordance with their original specs. Naturally, the primal bodies of the technique's masters served with greater might for having a good command on those techniques. However, upon transforming the flesh body into that of the opponent, there lied the fear of sustaining far too mighty influence of the opponent's mind, having the possibility of it resonating on a sizable scale in the future. Hence, unless a rigorous state of affairs, Batten Kaitos or Alfred did not make heavy use of these. What Lay Batten Kaitos and Roy Alfred principally exercised was lunar eclipse. What Louis Arneb principally exercised was solar eclipse. It remained as a last resort which Louis could buoyantly utilize for she owned no flesh body of her own, and possessed no firm self. However, half-killed in his battle with Ram, the moment he reconstructed Leaper Dorkle in order to survive, Baton Kaitos shattered the shell. Acquiring a command of solar eclipse, which he had not utilized until now due to being apprehensive of losing his self, he had discovered a technique of maintaining a firm oneself. He could now, better than before, with perfection and devoid of waste, enjoy the main dish named the life of the opponent. To grow in the midst of battle is something which originally wouldn't have ever happened to a senile old fool like me, yeah. Haha, Sue. This sure as heck's a masterpiece. Ain't that right, Ne-sama? Thanks to having established a tenacious self, he felt abundantly refreshed. He wanted to properly show this awakened condition of himself to the wonderful Ne-sama. For that purpose as well, he must opt for a method which exhorts her hatred even further. Scent of rage, flavor of rage, texture of rage, full course of rage. Should he not, with all of his might, surfeit the entirety of what he could experience through someone beloved, just what of him would be gourmet? Henceforth, to his self atop of the ground dragon's spine before his eyes, he shall. Speaking of, it's something that's never been done before, unexpectedly. Killing oneself by oneself, wonder if this would also make for discovery of new sense of values, you know. Dota Jayuan. The instant he winked the world altered, due to the short-distance spatial leap. The ground dragon, erupting a screech from the depths of its throat, was flabbergasted by Baton Kaitos' arrival, who was supposed to be in the rear, and attempted to run past him directly horizontally without halting its legs. Gallant, truly gallant. However, gallantness served to be nothing but a spice of the tragedies in future. Palm of the Fist King. The oscillating strike of the fist vigorously stabbed into the ground dragon's flank. Ordinarily, the strike would be fired by Baton Kaitos' petite stature, but that wasn't how it was for Baton Kaitos, who had been awakened by witnessing the abyss of death, and had acquired novel strength by shattering the shell. Neji Rockhart's original body drilled and penetrated the impact through the ground dragon's torso. The fist of the Fist King, which had vanquished even enormous full-body armors in countless fights to the death in the Gladiator Island. Basking its potency, the ground dragon exuded a voice suggesting fatality, and was vehemently bashed into the isle's wall. However, the ground dragon continued to shield the young girl atop itself, from the fist, from the wall, from the floor, and from its own build as well. Tenderly catching the body of the plummeting young girl with its extended tail, it gently dropped her off on the floor of the aisle. Though supposed to be a female animal, its handling was with such smartness, all gentlemen could follow it as an example. Involuntarily, even Baton Kaitos couldn't help but applaud. However, Sue. Even if you're to gently lay down on the floor and everything, hereafter the head will courteously be chopped off, and it will become a present for Ne-sama. Hopefully you do understand. Dota Jayuan. Alright, no violence, it's praise for doing your best. Even whilst toppling sideways, the ground dragon attempted to crunch him, whom he kicked into the jaws upwards. Though he seemed to nearly tear up upon its will in maximal of efforts, regrettably, Baton Kaitos and the ground dragon were mutual enemies. Even if he could extol its heroic endeavors, they could never look up toward the same sky of triumph. Should one side be victorious, another side shall be defeated. Though lamentable, that was what is called reality. Let's firmly Tsu. Bear that in mind. Okay. A pause per word, a scrupulous clamor, he knocked that into the black ground dragon. He must have now etched, alongside agony, a lesson into the crouched ground dragon, with shattered cheekbones and forelegs. Fortunately, Baton Kaitos could not eat the memories of the ground dragon. Thus, nor did he hold any reason to rob its life. He wished for them to both remember this day, together. What remained was for Ne-sama's sake, by Rem's hand, Ne-sama's precious Rem shall be. Stop pronouncing such eerie things. The moment immediately following the echo of the unyielding voice, his face, dangling above and towards Rem, was potently repelled. The face raised upon the reverberating voice, it had accepted the direct hit of two heels approaching from the immediate front. Subsequently repelled to the rear, Baton Kaitos glided through the floor on his back. And ahahaha. So you finally were kind enough to catch up, Ne-sama. Us, Rem and we all, had been awaiting. Steadily, he got up from a sprawled posture through merely the strength of his feet. And upon gazing at the facade of his beloved other half, he observed Ram making an expression as if her first instance of witnessing something. Ram, in this short while, you certainly became considerably ugly. Ram, in this short while, you certainly became considerably ugly. That had been Ram's candid impression, having caught up to a terribly foul and malevolent game of tag. Baton Kato's field of vision remaining in her grasp, Ram had headed to the locust, dragging her flesh body in a state of incomplete liberation, placing her trust in Patrash's tremendous efforts. In that aisle shortly distant from the spiral staircase in the fourth layer, she had discovered the form of the ground dragon, which had been tormented to the point of triturating, and Rem, who had been put to sleep by its side. And the one who had been playing tag with Rem. Lay, ugly you say, Nesama is cruel. We, so much you know. Cherish Nesama so much much. Unascertained, his articulation revolved, speech and conduct of reason disarrayed into fragments. The cause surely being it inducing abnormality onto his mind, Ram could know, perhaps anyone could comprehend that with a single glimpse. For Baton Kato's form was in an equally distorted condition. Lay, reconstructing the hulled memories in his flesh body, and facsimileing the shape and form of that opponent was supposed to be Baton Kato's ace in the hole, as she had priorly witnessed. However, it seemed to be a forbidden card for Baton Kato's as well, and the form of gluttony before Ram's eyes was any amongst all of the hulled memories, yet none. They were blended together, flabbily. With a part of the bald old man who had leaped through space, with a part of the corpulent giant who had taken no damage from Ram's blade of wind, with a part of the martial artist endowed with combat ability reaching holy precincts, as well as the physical features of variegated and profuse other humans, composed the ghastly, ominous appearance of his body. The length of his right hand and left hand, the size of his hands was dissimilar, tactlessly, even parts of his face were disparate and appeared as if referring to that of someone else. The remaining traits of the former Baton Kato's, if anything, was the expression of his eyes, but even that may have become a borrowed article by now. And it rather seemed that Baton Kato's himself remained ignorant to this distorted circumstance. Lay, Baton Kato's had now come to be something that was nobody. Before all else, an existence who resumed to specialize ransacking the memories of others may have been deficient in having a firm foundation of what is called self. That being the cause of origin, he broke. And what had taken birth in Lu was a Ram, monster posing as REM. To be truthful, never has Ram been this infuriated. Whilst glancing down onto the face of younger sister, whom she knew as fragments burying the damaged place of belonging, Ram embraced revulsion for Baton Kato's, who had appended her traits in a part of his face as well. Impressive how he could provoke someone with such precision. Subaru and him would have made for a good competition of who could irritate more. Ram, you did wonderfully, Patrash. Take Ram and stand back. Dodo Jayuan. With even its responding voice frail, she covered for a bleeding Patrash to the rear. Whilst dragging its large build, Patrash held Rem's nape in its mouth and withdrew, seeking to keep distance from the battlefield hereon, but Lay, that shan't do, Nesama. That is a valuable hors d'oeuvre. Because before surfeiting the main dish, garnishing is indispensable, you say. Ram, kindly die. Lifting her leg up to her head, she commenced her sprint with her palm turned towards the face, seeking to state an irrational line of argument. The blade of wind swirling therein was a minute storm, concealing the potency to tear up everything atop of the opponent's neck into shreds. With the matter having come this far, Ram abdicated, holding back. As a result of having tormented him without killing him, searching for a way to restore memories, she had endangered Rem's person, and as a matter of fact had invited a situation wherein Patrash sustained immense injuries. Ram shall accept the weight of that truth. She must offer her heaviest apologies to Subaru. And, in order to never repeat that error, she realized her intent to kill. Even if she were to take the earlier utterance of a destroyed mind into account, the possibility of gaining a decent answer from Baton Kato's was slim. Putting two and two together, this op seemed correct. Crushing Baton Kato's, and taking the burden of her flesh body back from Subaru. On top of that, returning Patrash and Rem to the green room, and Ram should likely head to back someone else. That was how far her plans went. Ram. On the brink of tearing his face apart with the storm, Ram gazed at the yielded alteration, in awe. It was not anything else. Once again, change had been generated in Baton Kato's outward appearance, that was all. However, for nobody but Ram, that had been an alteration difficult to let pass. On the forehead of that face wherein a plurality of features had assembled, a single white horn was summoned. Ram, that is. Truly, from the bottom of her heart, had she been moving by her instincts, she shall veil before him. For in their entirety, Baton Kato's deeds had been nothing but exasperating Ram. Lay, Nisama. That moment in time, with certainty, by a face the same as that of Rem's, by a voice which seemingly nobody Rem would vocalize, she was called. Subsequently, Baton Kato's behemoth arm hammered a strike into Ram's petrified face. It was not fatal. However, neither was it a hit light enough to be optimistic about. Her skull and brain undulating, blood cascaded down her nose. Her underfoot becoming unsteady regardless of the floor, was the proof of her having sustained enormous damage and injury. And, the one to have brought it forth, a touchingly lovely young girl with an amiable countenance and blue hair seeming a jest as it were, in this sight had assembled three faces of the same aura. Lei, please do cry, Ne-sama. Wafting the ambience of the plead, whilst inducing tears into those pale blue eyes, his fist swung. In but a single strike, the impact entered into her bone medullas, or even the soul present in their depths. Lei, please do get angry, Ne-sama. Her face lowered once her abdomen was bludgeoned, and a punch impaled into her jaw. Though her tongue survived being crunched, her abdomen was bludgeoned once again and she was thrown backwards, falling prey to consecutive elbows into her cranium. Lei, please do laugh, Ne-sama. The deep affection that voice was subsumed in, abraded Ram's heart with each word. Ram, who had always continued to sleep within Ram's cognizance. Her robbed younger sister, with her memories erased, whom she was supposed to always be beside yet she wasn't, anywhere. She had been looking forward to being called by her for the first time, after her eyes opened, one day, eventually. Though would Ram have regained the memories of her younger sister at that time, she did not know. Even if they did not return, even if they did return, her words at that time would surely be special like a baby's cry. That was now being. Lei. Please cry. Please get angry. Please laugh. Please suffer. Please smile. Please ache. Please be sullen. Please get excited. Please be bashful. Please sleep. Please blush. Please take umbrage. Please be surprised. Please wish well. Ne-sama. 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 Ram. Refer to her that way, as she was about to cry those words out, her mouth was plugged by the sole of his palm, rendering her unable to voice. The monster given rise to by Ram, in the final stage his ability and strength, was immense and overwhelming. He possessed no hesitancy. He possessed no restraints in what he hauled out. He possessed no awareness that he was losing himself. Yet, never did he sunder his form from that of Ram's precious other half. Heedless of the moon and the sun being obscured, the darkness had painted gluttony with flawless perfection. Of course, Ram did not get complacent either. She made efforts to counterstrike. Unfastening her shackles until the limit of what Subaru could shoulder, leaping over the limitation she had levied on herself that she shan't use her strength greater than for a few tens of seconds, devoting strength capable of ending life with certainty this time. It stood no chance. Seemingly, none of it could contend against him. Lei, Ne-sama, Ne-sama, such an expression seems unbefitting of Ne-sama. Ram, Huck. A fist by her younger sister, with tapered lips and a dependent expression, made her correct her blunder. Her face perforated and knocked off, crashing into the wall behind, Ram somehow wielded the pride of not collapsing before the blasphemer. However, at present, that alone took the entirety of Ram's might, this being the condition she was in. Just how much time had passed since she had commenced fighting this monster? 10 seconds, 20 seconds, she had unmistakably far exceeded the time limit she had initially established. The time she felt sensation of held no purport, and the flexibility to count the actual time passed, non-existent. However, whether escape had been possible or not was what was utmost portentous. Carrying through as a substitute doll which sustained all attacks, she had supported Patrash and Rem's retreat. Perhaps that was what her objective had been, but due to pummeled in the head far too many times, even that she couldn't recall with precision. Her body was heavy. Her breath was worn. Her head aching, her throat parched, her limbs numb, the old wound on her forehead surging blood forth. From the colorless, white scar, blood rivulet down her face as if a longitudinal slash. Lei, something so unclean, that shan't do. The face traced with blood, was slammed yet again by the fist. Bathing in the single strike, her body slid, and at last her knees lost their capacity to bear her body weight. Within the interval as she proceeded to topple sideways, a faint voice saying no split through in between, and a kick was fired. Defenselessly receiving it by her chest, Ram crashed into the wall whilst her breastbone creaked. Before one could take notice, the Pleiades watchtower, supposed to be a firm existence, parted with its sturdiness and had altered into what had resilience befitting of mere raw material. In other words, basking in the outrage and assault against Ram alongside, the wall shattered at last. Ram rent through the stone wall and collapsed into the opposite side of the aisle. Thick plumes of dust shrouded her environs, as she violently coughed up blood and something of floury texture. That very instant, her broken bones and shattered flesh commenced a great orchestra of screeches, each striving to be the greatest. Turning her head, she attempted to confirm exactly what location had she been pummeled into. Ram, ah! A muffled, husky breath escaped out of her. It may have been one mixed with despondency or deficit sentiment. In Ram's line of sight, ahead of the aisle she had collapsed into, were the figures of Patrash and Rem. At a distance of a few tens of meters at best, the time Ram had bought had been markedly prolonged than the anguish Ram had tasted, being 10 seconds, which merely felt overlong. Nesama, are you unhurt? Barefacedly inquiring about her safety, without treading across the shattered wall, Baton Katos took a detour of the aisle and headed towards her. Ad interim, whilst hugging her arm, Ram somehow stood up at her place. Entrusting her body onto the wall, the decrepit Patrash and her mutually exchanged glances. Dodo Jayuan. Ram, yes, it is understood. Once everything is over, let us chastise Barusu together. The truth was, she was unaware of what Patrash had stated. However, the fact that the black ground dragon made no effort for revision was proof that Ram's response had been unmistaken. Ram's judgment, she was compelled to acquiesce, it had backfired. The fact that she did not kill Baton Katos at the foremost, that developed to be the trigger for everything. Attempting to rectify that error, she had waged combat aiming to instantaneously take his life this time, but Baton Katos, having survived from the brink of death, ultimately resorted to what was the optimum solution for him. Consequently, with her asleep younger sister's living body laid hold of, Ram, as she plummeted into turmoil, faced onslaught. She had used up all of the cards she possessed in her hand, and the card she pulled turned traitor to her as well. Though Ram had awareness of being outstripping in multitudes of facets, she also possessed awareness of being helplessly dearth regarding one particular facet. The serendipity of time. Ever since the day she had her horn slashed off, and had failed the way of the Oni clan, that remained unswerving. Above all, she did possess much attachment to its way. For Ram herself had been the one to find it utmost objectionable in the whole world. Yet, as fate would have it, she couldn't help but long for having her horn now. No, that would not be veracious. Speaking with precision, she did have the horn itself. The horn itself, presently, was with Ram, within her reach. The wand of her habitual use, which she always carried with herself in that wand's foundation, Ram's broken horn, was being utilized. The horn was a crucial organ that efficiently congregated mana required by the tenacious bodies of the Oni clan members. Therefore, as a catalyst for exercising magic, there existed not another article which Ram was further accustomed to. For that purpose, Roswell had taken the pains of retrieving the horn, and had custom-made this wand. Whether in the wand or on her forehead, simply differing positions of the horn made so immense of a Ram. Incidentally, whilst pondering over her horn, a particular thought levitated in Ram's mind. The consequence of Ram mobilizing her knowledge in order to connect possibilities of defeating this situation, through contemplating about the presence and absence of her horn, as well as the truth that she had once overwhelmed Baton Katos. Ram, whose horn was broken, and Rem, who remained asleep. The latter concerned with consequence, but with regards the former. Why did Roswell retrieve Ram? Ram was au courant of the duty Roswell sought of her. She was also mindful of what scheme Roswell was seeking to carry out in its course. Ram had also heard that she was necessary for that purpose, that it would be natural once the time arrived, and that he was aware of the means for it. Thus, Ram purposively intended not to inquire into it until the time arrived. However, in these moments levitated a thought necessary for Ram herself, for Rem, who continued to slumber, for Patrash, who fought for the sake of the sisters, to survive. It was a dreadfully preposterous possibility. However, it also withheld her chest, conveying it was also convincing and reasonable. Had it been Roswell L. Mathers, whom Ram had fallen in love with? Ram, he would have surely done it as well, with courage befittingly being called inhuman. Spilling those words, Ram withdrew the wand her thigh was equipped with juddering hands. Intently gazing at the wand she had operated for 10 years, and she vigorously knocked it into the wall. From the interior of the splintered wand, flew out that which she hadn't laid her eyes upon for a long span of time. As it swiveled and gyrated nearly to an unpleasant extent, just like back then. Steadily, clearing away the colorless dust enshrouding the aisle with his hand, Baton Katos stepped forth. With an elegant gait brimming with graceful conduct, to not cause any noise greater than necessary was the etiquette of a maid, and the minimum consideration in order to not bring shame to one's master. Ahead of the smoke was supposed to be his beloved elder sister, collapsed. He had wished to see her various expressions. Conceiving potent emotions, her light crimson eyes set ablaze, he had wished to directly gaze back into them. That was a resolute initial desire, which could now be perceived as awakening of love. Lay, oh dear. Dota Jayuan. Beyond the dust, what was first in his sight was the black ground dragon dragging its feet. During his confab and contact with Nesama, before one could notice, the ground dragon had gone out of vision. Though not particularly a subject of his interest, he did have a task to fulfill regarding the existence brought along by the ground dragon. He wished to erase that existence, which unpreparedly lured Nesama's mind. Oneself being the only one to refer to Nesama as Nesama and yearn for her was sufficient. Nesama belonged to oneself alone. Lay, there it is. On the opposite side of the ground dragon twisting its build, there lay the form of the sleeping beauty drooping by the wall. With the body raised just ideally, it would be easy to aim for the throat to the heart. Immediately bringing an end to that lifetime, he must commence with the main dish, Nesama. Yes, as he distanced closer to the sleeping beauty, Baton Katos took notice. The head of the young girl with eyes cast downward, crowned with blue hair, that it was dimly and fleetingly glowing. For not but a moment, he was puzzled regarding the identity of that glow. However, saying that wasn't possible, he repudiated the answer arising from one's own cognizance. The possibility of the slumbering young girl performing that was. Ram, to make a correction. Lay, Huck, nay sa. Ram thought she did not possess the serendipity of time. However, that was wrong. He attempted to call to the owner of the voice he had heard, but was unable to succeed. A strike with velocity exceeding that knocked Baton Kato's face. Astonishment, and the subsequent instant the shock wave pierced through him, pushing him towards the opposite direction in the aisle he had trodden. Lay, Sue. Unable to kill off the vigor of the excessive might, Baton Katos crashed into the wall twice and came to a halt. Stupefaction preceded agony or anguish, he immediately stood up, then knelt upon the weight of the damage. A profound blow, as if shattering until the very core of his body. Wondering just what had happened, Baton Katos made an astonished expression upon his lovely, amiable face. Ram, it rather seems, even the heavens are head over heels in love with Ram and Rem's cuteness. Dust enveloped the hole in the wall she had shattered through. An instant after he tried to concentrate his vision in that direction, his face was seized by her palm with velocity that deserted even sound. And, from a close proximity, he gazed at the opponent possessing a tight grip of his cheeks and jaw. Lay, nay, Sama. Ram, unfortunately, Ram's little sister is asleep in the interior. Ram knows with clarity, due to synesthesia. Lay, science, the. Ram, it is synesthesia. Ram and Rem were chum sisters, isn't it? Delight or rage, sadness or pain, things like those could be shared amongst. The reactivation of a broken horn, and its recoil as well. He did not distinctly understand what meaning it held. Merely, what Baton Katos had witnessed with these eyes had been affirmed. Before being knocked off his feet, what he had observed on the forehead of the sleeping beauty leaning on the wall was a white horn, the singular asset preponderating her elder sister, that Oni girl possessed by birth. Because that existed, because that glowed, because that communicated, what purport would it hold? Ram, though Barusa's plan being a hint is an annoyance, it is fine. Lay, what did, Subaru-kun? Ram, kindly stop saying Barusa's name, with that face and that voice. Lay, Tsu. That moment, with his grasped face and body lifted upwards, Baton Katos was slammed into the ground with vigor. In nervousness, Baton Katos swung his limbs. Ram opened and closed her fist, a gesture of seeming affirmation, whilst shedding immense quantities of blood from the scar on her forehead. However, rather than perceiving the cascade of blood as irksome, she loosened her lips in its reception. As though this blood in pain proved the linkage of a vanished bond. Ram, those born in a space of dark, are to kindly return to the space of dark. If you took birth in company of cries, then take company of cries and kindly die. Wiping off the blood on her forehead with her palm, eyes of light crimson looked down upon Baton Katos. Baton Katos had assembled the plethora of everything until now, wishing for violent emotion to dwell within those eyes. Upon that sin archbishop of gluttony, Ram looked down with eyes freezing cold. Ram, the reincarnation of the Oni god. Though Ram never liked it, Ram shall enact it just for today. Ram's adorable little sister's counterfeit, this time for sure you shall be ripped to shreds. Chapter 84, Heave-Ho? Heave-Ho. Stabilizing the image was essential in constructing ice in accordance with imagination. Back when Subaru had initially proposed ice brand arts to her as well, she had considered it to be incredibly handy, but Amelia remained insecure whether she would be able to pull it off. Subaru, it's alright. No need to worry. Emilia Tan will surely be able to do it. So ascertained Subaru to an uncertain Emilia with his thumb raised, she recalled. Now that she thought of it, that too had been completely unfounded. No, Emilia believed Subaru had supported her back with his reason being, because I love you. In the course of creating weapons she imaged, Emilia studied a lot of illustration. Unlike songs, studying illustration wasn't a specialty of hers, yet, by drawing time and time again with Subaru, she was met by definite improvement. From the sidelines, during her studies, watching Emilia draw with Subaru and Beatrice, Ram was amazed, Otto smiled wryly, Frederica and Petra occasionally joined in, and Garfield advised her on what would be better. Roswell, too, observed Emilia and Beatrice drawing from a distance every so often. For Emilia, these were reminiscences tremendously, immensely valuable, exigent to part ways from. Reminiscences which have, though disappeared for everyone, which were remembered by Subaru. Upon the advent of that thought, a warm emotion surged deep within her chest. Emilia, I shall change that into courage with a haya. Upon the motive power of the surging emotion, accompanied with the weapons of ice she had produced and the 7 soldiers of ice which advanced alongside her, Emilia tackled the divine dragon Volcanica before herself. As per the aforementioned explanation, the image was essential in the shaping of ice. Naturally, that was the case with weapons, but also with the soldiers of ice brought forth. In other words, the soldiers of ice had been configured to a shape easy for Emilia to image. To summarize, fighting alongside Emilia were 7 Natsuki Subarus. Emilia, but they're more powerful and quick than the real Subaru, so. Though Subaru wouldn't lose in naughtiness and frolicsomeness either, his structure differed from that of the soldiers created with ice from its very foundation. The soldiers' strength depended on the density of the mana bestowed upon them by Emilia, and could not be compared with simple sculptures of ice. They were the same as weapons of ice, and no less than steel. Emilia, go! Abiding by Emilia's command, the ice warriors dashing in the vanguard plunged into Volcanica's range. Volcanica did not move, remaining reclined on the colossal pillar in the center of the first layer of the watchtower, and the range of its earlier tail whip was 4 to 7 meters. That instant, as if it had detected the will to hold fast to the pillar, it swung its blue dragon tail with great velocity. Making an eccentric sound which could only be described as a hole opened up in the air, the following moment, the upper bodies of the ice warriors in the vanguard got smashed to smithereens. Having bathed in the direct hit from the area of their chest, the trunks of the ice warriors shattered into 2 at that spot, as their heads, taking after Subaru and the sharp look of his eyes, were blown off. Emilia, sorry. But, you would have been aimed for regardless of my presence. Apologies to the soldiers of ice turned to touchstones, but now she precisely understood Volcanica's aim. Though the divine dragon had gotten Alzheimer's, had blanked out about the trial as well, the will to intercept all opponents, distinctly aiming for the pillar yet remained alive within it. Regardless of the existence or non-existence of its life. Henceforth, she wielded a course of action. Emilia, soldier Sans, please. In concert with Emilia's voice, the ice warriors jumped in order to overtake the silver-haired young girl. The first one was shattered, leaving 6 ice warriors, each fell in respective separate directions, and headed towards the central pillar whilst creating a faint difference of time. Volcanica, thou, who hath reached the top of the tower. Step forth through the first floor, almighty petitioner. Sensing the presences of the approaching ice warriors, the divine dragon repeated its vocal message yet again. Seeing it relay that which was not but an enumeration of words now devoid of meaning, to dulls possessing no ears to hear from, made Emilia feel potent desolateness and a heart-wrenching sense of misery. Despite having been turned to this shape, Volcanica was trying to protect something. Though she did not know with whom, with what, and for what purpose had it exchanged that promise. Volcanica, I am Volcanica. In accordance with the ancient covenant, I ask the will of thee who hath reached the summit. Within the blink of an eye, 2 of the ice warriors armed with weapons were shattered with a swing of the tail. Though each had taken a defensive stance as an instantaneous response, one had everything below its waist blasted off, the other had its right half of its body subjected to the same, as they crumbled, unable to make any decent movement. Hence, the remaining 4 headed for the tail returning to its original position from the attacking stance to place a check on it. It may be possible that not simply Alzheimer's, but its legs and loins had become weaker and unsteady as well. If it was in a state where simply standing up was arduous for it, then pinning down that tail would be sufficient. Emilia, brace yourselves. With the aim of immobilizing the tail, 3 ice warriors joined their arms together. Attempting to mow down those ice warriors all at once, yet again the tail of the divine dragon deserted sound behind. Though similar to the whip Subaru used in arrangement, its pace and might was in an entirely different league. Had it been Subaru's whip, then Emilia could have caught it bare-handed, but that would be impossible for the dragon's tail whip. potency which would have taken any ordinary living being's entire might, the divine dragon hurled it with listlessness akin to brushing away insects. The impact brought forth by that tail once again struck the three ice warriors lined up side by side with lowered waists. However, the shattering resonance supposed to have echoed did not resound here. For she had generated a wall of ice behind the three ice warriors with lowered waists, which supported them. Should she know the strike was coming, she had countermeasures prepared. Despite the entirety of their bodies developing cracks, the ice warriors, taking after the young boy with a sharp expression of eyes, raised the edges of their mouths. And from the rear of the three who had halted the impact, the remaining final one jumped ahead, having been charged with a separate roll. What the final ice warrior wielded was a weapon known as a susumata. On the spearhead of the handle, similar to a long arrow, a curve-shaped fitting with the purpose of not stabbing but subduing the opponent was fixed, seemingly called so for its usage as a catcher. Using that susumata to thrust it down, it pinned the divine dragon's ill-mannered tail down onto the floor. The dragon tail, having ceased movement, even its utmost slim end of the tail was bulky like a log and impossible of being held back by simply one susumata, so the crack three successively tackled with sajimatas as well. And, for convenient points, were arrested by the sajimatas, and even the divine dragon had its tail blocked. Volcanica, thou, who hath reached the top of the tower. Step forth through the first floor, almighty petitioner. The subsequent instant, with the sound of the world being splintered, the four leaping bodies of the ice warriors were gouged in their entirety. Everything upwards of their hips had vanished cleanly, and with only their lower bodies left, the ice warriors crumbled. The one responsible was not the tail having gotten serious after being immobilized, but claws. Whilst on the floor, Volcanica used its left frontal limb instead of its tail. By merely that, Emilia's soldiers of ice had been extinguished with certainty and without escape. She narrowly escaped being tricked into believing it had become infirm. Emilia, if both the limbs and the tail are doing well, then why did just your important brain get blank, damn it? Volcanica, I am Volcanica. In accordance with the ancient covenant, I ask the will of thee who hath reached the summit. Emilia, I get it already, for God's sake. Repetition which would have driven anyone into further frenzy aside from Emilia. Despite having to hear it, Emilia's resolved spirit of challenge shan't shatter. What could be shattered were only the soldiers of ice, though naturally, that did slightly hurt her heart. Emilia, it's all right. It's not as if I didn't get to know anything. Asserting that the death of the shattered ice warriors had not been in vain, Emilia too headed towards the tail's range. However, the sajimatas of ice suppressing the tail were going strong, rendering the sacrifice of the four ice soldiers worthwhile. Thus naturally, claws would now aim for Emilia instead of the tail, but Emilia, the range which both of your hands reach is shorter than the tail, yes? And also, before those claws could seize Emilia, ice spears passed by Emilia and drew near the divine dragon. They had been hurled by ice warriors, brought forth once again in Emilia's rear. At their original positions, the maximum number of ice warriors Emilia could create was 7, but it was possible for them to be recreated whenever they got shattered. In other words, the ice warriors could stand up again however many times until Emilia exhausted her strength. Precisely like the true Natsuki Subaru. Volcanica, thou, who hath reached the top of the tower. Step forth through the first floor, almighty petitioner. Emilia, Kia. Upon the incessant downpour of ice spears outside of its range, Volcanica slammed its forelimbs into the front. That singular strike seemed as if rending space, producing a shock wave that appeared to be an eternal mark of its claws, swallowing the entirety of the first layer including Emilia and the ice warriors. Whilst halting the impact on her body brought by the shockwave, Emilia strained her amethyst-colored eyes. The central pillar Volcanica was protecting, its firmness was solid, and she had not been able to carefully observe the pillar yet either. From a distant view it appeared to be no different from the other 5 pillars, but that judgment too was premature. However, what Emilia sought utmost here, instead of the central pillar itself, was Emilia, located on its top, the tower's summit. Undauntedly stepping into the wind, Emilia kicked the floor with might on that very spot. She was yet too distant to take any action regarding Volcanica or the pillar. However, stepping ahead here was the correct answer. For the ice warriors, restored from their initially shattered states, lowered their waists and braced their arms. And, catching Emilia's feet as she stepped ahead, assisted her into a leap towards greater height at once. Having pinned down the tail, directing its attention to the pillar, she used that interval and headed towards the uppermost stratum which she sought the utmost. Though a combination Emilia would not recklessly use either, Emilia's intuition, having reached this far, implored that the summit was one which must be reached. The great leap which borrowed the ice warrior's assistance, using it to jump above Volcanica's head at once, she made for the topmost surface of the pillar. Should she simply ascend to the uppermost stratum from there? Emilia, the heck! The following instant, whilst Emilia attempted to make her fingers reach the pillar, a tranquil heat wave grazed her feet. No, it was not tranquil. Sound had simply died at the hands of its exceeding might and heat. If it had killed the very concept of sound, it would be no enigma for it to have converted to a soundless phenomenon. Emilia's perception detected the extinguishment of the ice warriors deployed across the first layer. The one which had lent its hand to shield Emilia's vision, the four which had thrown ice spears in its support, the two which had sprinted for supplementing Sajamatas, disappeared at the same second. And what accomplished this was neither Volcanica's tail nor its forelimbs. Volcanica, I am Volcanica. In accordance with the ancient covenant, I ask the will of thee who hath reached the summit. Yes, the death wail of scorching air was heard from its mouth, which never parted solely with its majesticness. With the arrival of another one of its reiterations into her ears as a start, Emilia comprehended the resuscitation of the killed concept of sound, whilst at the same time, her fingers reached for the pillar's topmost surface. Somehow desperately fixing her body, Emilia looked down below. There spreading wide was the first layer, scorched white. White fumes akin to smolders rose from multiple spots, with not even the wreckage of the ice warriors supposed to have existed left behind. Such heat, such might, such annihilation. The breath of the divine dragon Volcanica had burnt all to naught. Emilia, both the tail and the legs are doing well, can even spit goddamn fire, and yet. Volcanica, thou, who hath reached the top of the tower. Step forth through the first floor, almighty petitioner. Emilia, good lord, I get it. I do understand. I get it so. Oh. Responding with a lack of grievousness taking into account the events that had occurred, Emilia widened her eyes midway through. Steadily, the eyes of the divine dragon aimed upwards, the yellow eyeballs reflecting Emilia within themselves. And Volcanica, I am Volcanica. In accordance with the ancient covenant, I ask the will of thee who hath reached the summit. Whilst pronouncing so, Volcanica unfolded both of its blue wings, and stood up at its position. Emilia, oh hell no hook. Comprehending the hazard of the events occurring below, Emilia extended her hand towards the topmost surface of the tower in great panic. In the interlude she was preoccupied with that, Volcanica deracinated its tail being restrained by the Sajamatas, and sought to slowly flap its wings. It intended flight. It was, after all, the divine dragon Volcanica. Flying for it would be a matter of course, but since Emilia had never witnessed a flying dragon, her sense of reality had been puny. First of all, would a creature with a body so gigantic truly be able to soar in the skies? Emilia, I've only ever seen Puck and Roswell fly too. It was ineluctable for Puck, a spirit, and Roswell, an eccentric magician, to fly. From what she had heard, in the southern Valakia Empire, just like ground dragons or water dragons, there existed flying dragons named winged dragons, so Volcanica was possibly also considered as a winged dragon. Or perhaps, to categorize dragons and the dragon as the same may be an air in itself. Emilia, Heave-Ho. Heave-Ho. Hiya. Sha. Letting out an enthusiastic cry, Emilia clambered towards the tower's top at her greatest possible speed. Though from a distant view her speed was jaw-droppingly astonishing, even if Emilia were to make fortunate effort beyond common sense, she lacked one card to be able to desert everything behind and dash on ahead. Volcanica, thou, who hath reached the top of the tower. Step forth through the first floor, almighty petitioner. She was not hallucinating to be hearing that voice from a distance closer than before. For she had not managed to desert everything below her behind, the pronouncement had ascended to the same altitude as hers. Unfolding both of those blue wings, an unbelievably humongous frame fluttered midair. Majestic and dignified, the divine dragon Volcanica soared into the dune sky with pressure of presence ignorant to its decline. Its evolving air of intimidation, or the glint in its eye glaring the opponent impotent, its tail or its forelimbs, even its breath, none of it turned traitor to it being a hyper-ranked dragon chronicled in legends. However, the singularity which did turn traitor to that. Emilia, I intend to go above the first layer, so I may not be your enemy. Volcanica, I am Volcanica. In accordance with the ancient covenant, I ask the will of thee who hath reached the summit. Poured with a voice conveying it possessed no ears to hear from, as Emilia clung to the pillar, Volcanica's menace resumed pursuit of her. Inhaling, Emilia gritted her molars and borrowed the power of a foothold which did not exist there, and jumped over the tail whip. Emilia, Yahoo! Practical usage of ice brand arts rather than clambering up that pillar, she installed footholds at its flanks, accelerating her speed by jumping above them. Emilia, would the limbs become free too? Kaya. The instantaneously drawn twin swords of ice energetically repelled the slamming tail away. A strike swung whilst relying on guesswork. Both of Amelia's arms, from her wrists to her elbows, went numb due to the vigor, rendering her seemingly unable to wield another novel weapon for the multiple seconds it would take her to stand up. However, unlike the damage taken by Amelia, Volcanica had simply swung its tail. Despite its transiency, the divine dragon, which resumed to undertake the same conduct before the challenger swung its tail, its endeavor being to drop no, to crush the opponent seeking to capture the pillar. Amelia, Huck. Amelia's breath was packed in response to that approaching tail. Should she be repelled once, she did not perceive she would have enough stamina left to reach the pillar once again. Should she suffer a direct hit from the tail notched with scales, she would surely be left in a terrible state. She could not let that tail's attack connect. Amelia, I can still work really hard. She could not use her arms. However, she could move her legs. She could aim for the top. Though she had created footholds in order to aim for the top, that shall not be sufficient. There was a limit to the number of ice ploys she could generate at once. She could not let that labor go to waste. Fulfilling the purpose of the footholds, she then shall be met by that which was endless. Amelia, I get it. Volcanica, thou, who hath reached the top of the tower. Step forth through the first floor, almighty petitioner. Yet another tail whip drew near Amelia, to whom a great idea had just occurred. Amelia somehow evaded it by borrowing the ordinary power of the footholds. And, bringing forth the new foothold she had thought of towards the pillar, she ingeniously grasped that hand by extending her own hand. Amelia, please, Soldier San. Responding to that voice of Amelia's, the one to creak its arms constructed of ice was an ice warrior taking after Subaru, having been generated yet again after being burnt to annihilation, but merely its upper body. Not simply a foothold, but an existence which functioned as both a foothold as well as a reliable ally of Amelia's, that was, the course of ice, with simply their upper bodies growing out of the pillar one after the other. Since they simply had their upper bodies growing out of the pillar and she did not have to create their legs, she could also raise their number to greater than 7. Making around 10 of them grow out of the pillar at once, Amelia borrowed their hands, and headed upwards. Amelia, hiya. Ya. Sure ya. Alright, why? Borrowing the hands of the upper bodies of ice growing out of the pillar in a literal sense, Amelia climbed towards the topmost surface of the pillar. Meanwhile, Volcanica did attempt to obstruct Amelia, but the men on the pillar hindered it from the side. Captured in its attribute of protecting the pillar, Volcanica was unable to leave the ice warriors on that pillar. The generated ice warriors hurled swords and axes of ice towards Volcanica, and as the divine dragon repelled them, it hunted the ice warriors on the pillar one by one through its tail or forelimbs. Although, whilst Amelia headed for the pillar's top. Amelia, though this spot is a bit tough. To have overcome the hazard would be somewhat too lively an impression, but with the ice soldier's strength and sacrifice as the foundation stone, Amelia's hands finally reached for the topmost surface of the pillar. Though she would reach the uppermost stratum of the tower in around 10 more meters, the topmost surface of the pillar was in a bent condition akin to that of a rat guard, so climbing hereon would be the deed of utmost difficulty. Though the situation was one wherein even people who specialized in mountain climbing would be troubled, fortunately, Amelia specialized in tree climbing. In the past, her zeal for it had led her to be scolded by Fortuna and Arch. Amelia, the numbness of my fingers is also alright, now I can. Regaining the sensation of her numb fingers, Amelia tackled the bent, unkind pillar. Grasping the hand of the ice warrior growing reversely on the slant, she drifted her legs midair towards the unstable skies. But thanks to the ice warrior's assistance, her climb was stable. What remained was only for Volcanica's obstruction to be Amelia, Huck. That moment, faint slackening and a prank by destiny infiltrated. Volcanica, I am Volcanica. In accordance with the ancient covenant, I ask the will of thee who hath reached the summit. The outbreaking potent jolts were caused by a severe strike into the pillar by Volcanica's tail, whilst it articulated so. It waved impact through the entirety of the pillar, thoroughly fissuring the ice warriors with solely their upper bodies growing out of that pillar, shattering them at once. And neither was the ice warrior lending its hand to Amelia on the slant an exception. Amelia, ah. The hand she had grasped shattered from the tip of its shoulder, and Amelia's body fell, having lost its support. The ice warrior, with a sharp expression of eyes, tried to halt her, but neither of its hands could reach anymore. Instantly, suspension enveloped the entirety of Amelia's body, putting Amelia's risky climb of the pillar to waste, invalidating it all and placing her back onto the first layer. That was not what occurred. Amelia, Lord save me. The height of the pillar she had attempted to clamber, Amelia was supposed to fall down multiple tens of meters. Amelia inhaled upon that premonition, however, something caught Amelia's hips unexpectedly quickly. Not an ice warrior. In terms of sensation, all of the ice warriors growing from the pillar had all been shattered. Furthermore, her hands were immediately touching something rugged and rigid. Amelia, could it be? Volcanica, thou, who hath reached the top of the tower. Step forth through the first floor, almighty petitioner. A voice reached her from close proximity, as Amelia confirmed the winds of high heights and the sensation below her hips. Due to the nearness of that voice, Amelia made a delayed realization that she had fallen on top of the divine dragon Volcanica's back. Amelia, Huck. Stay focused. From here I may be able to. She may, once again, be able to use Volcanica as a stool and reach the pillar. So planned Amelia, but the distress of being unable to execute that with ease descended upon her. Flapping its wings, Volcanica ascended and twisted its body, intending to throw her off. Amelia, ugh, Uwuk. Enduring the mighty, powerful wind assailing upon her body, Amelia desperately clung to the dragon's spine. Physical wind Amelia had never felt until now, which she was clinging to her scales, every single one of them colossal and tenacious akin to rocks, and she would not be able to persist for long should things remain this way. Furthermore, Volcanica was merely flying in the sky with freedom. She was not basking in a tail whip, hammer arm, much less its dragon breath. It was merely flying with vigor, seeking to make the clinging Amelia fall. Should she lose to this, it would be far too. Amelia, I would no longer be able to look Subaru and everyone else in the eye. Should she heedlessly open her mouth, her lungs might get ruptured by the plunging wind. Her eyes cast downwards, her molars gritted tightly, Amelia thought back to the people she cherished beyond her eyelids. Resolve akin to having to die, but that was not the case. The purpose of Amelia thinking of the people she cherished was so that she could face forward. For her to be given a push on her back, and to gain the courage to look ahead. Even whilst being swallowed by the tremendous winds, Amelia forced her eyelids to open. A circumstance wherein she had to pour the entirety of her strength or she would be unable to even open her eyelids. In its midst, without losing the strength of her amethyst eyes, Amelia dared to open her eyes to discover a means to survive. Humans are beings who end up closing their eyes in times of being crushed by fright and insecurity. But, the people whom Amelia cherished, depicted in the rear of her eyelids, faced forward in precisely such times. People who did not close their eyes in times precisely as those. She must have her eyes remain open. In order to reach for something, in order to hold someone's hand, and Amelia, that weirdo. The whole surface, left and right, everywhere, the spectacle was under the rain of blue. Though Amelia being in skies even above clouds was also a reason, it was also because the divine dragon Amelia was clinging to was clad in brilliant blue scales. Since everything aside from that quickly passed by due to their exceedingly high speed, even Amelia's perception of moving bodies, which could discern even the path of a thrown ball like a seam, couldn't capture the world within itself. Thus, what Amelia's awareness captured was not the world outside of the blue. Volcanica, I am Volcanica. In accordance with the ancient covenant, I ask the will of thee who hath reached the summit. Volcanica soared whilst twisting and turning its body. It seemed the area Amelia was clinging to was around the base of Volcanica's wings. Enigmatically, the dragon did not move its wings with that much engagement. Though it was necessary for birds and insects to flutter their wings for flight, the principle of dragon's flight appeared to be different. It was surely closer to Puck or Roswell's mechanism for flying. If so, Amelia, Roswell used magic. Puck too, used a mysterious power so. Unfortunately, never had she tried this with Roswell, nor did she intend to. However, for an extensive duration, Amelia had lived and spent time together with her family whom she thought comprised of solely one. For this singular year, they had been separated, and there had been multiple instances of her feeling incredibly lonely. Sometimes she nearly cried at night, but reminiscences provided support through it. And the voice present within those reminiscences showed hope to Amelia in this pressing time. That was, Amelia, I'm just guessing here, but could it be that you also don't like to have your neck tickled? The amethyst eyes opened with force, captured the long neck of the divine dragon twisting its frame. Below that great draconic jaw, amidst the uniform blue scales, was a sole white scale. The days of frolicking about with Puck dawned onto Amelia's mind. Stop it, Leah. If you do it so softly then my concentration will get disturbed, you know? Amelia, isn't he that right, Puck? Accompanied with a responding voice, Amelia concentrated her consciousness. Amidst this mighty wind, Amelia did not possess the strength to directly reach that white scale. However, what she had learned by the pillar could be resuscitated even should the other party change from an inorganic to an organic substance. Emilia, Soldier-san. Ahead of Emilia's cognizance, the soldiers of ice once again appeared around the white scale. Ice soldiers which were solidly supporting each other with merely their upper bodies, and one that was borne in their core steadily extended its hand towards the white scale. Volcanica, Haran. For the first time, Emilia heard a voice apart from the divine dragon's repetitions. Reverse scale, there existed a phrase so. This phrase, originating from ancient Chinese traditions, spoke of dragons, who were legendary beings, each possessing a singular scale which shan't be touched on their throat, called a reverse scale. A dragon, whose reverse scale was touched, fell into rage and assuredly killed the opponent. Originating from that custom, to touch a part of the opponent which shall not be touched came to be expressed with the phrase touching the reverse scale. Of course, Emilia possessed no reason to be aware of such origins of historic phrases from a disparate world. She sought to touch the white scale on the dragon's throat in order to muddle the concentration of the opponent, who was vigorously flying about attempting to make her fall, and by an interval of time. However, Emilia, Kaya. Screaming as she was hurled into the air, Emilia witnessed the earth and the heavens revolve round and round for her. However, her suspension midair lasted even shorter this time compared to when she had landed on the dragon's spine earlier. Caught by a solid sensation, Emilia took an entirely defensive stance and tumbled. And, nimbly standing up at that spot, she remained cautious regarding her environs. Breathing hoarsely, Emilia glanced around her environs. Fortunately, there were no hints of an abrupt attack assailing down upon Emilia. That too was a matter of course. At present, Volcanica, the subject of her utmost vigilance, was far, far above. Volcanica, Haran. As if extraordinarily revolted by its white scale being touched, Volcanica agonized as it ascended to higher skies. With the echo of a whale ostensibly crunching the sky, Emilia involuntarily rounded her eyes. Emilia, Puck used to enjoy it though. Regardless, it was each person's individual response to enjoy it or to not enjoy it. Admonishing herself to not become self-assertive, Emilia affirmed the sensation of her limbs. Tremendously swung about by Volcanica, the blood flow of her body had become slightly strange. Depending on the situation, hindrances in the blood flow resulted in the phenomena of losing vision due to lack of blood flow into the brain, but Emilia had managed to barely hold out. And, with that affirmation, Emilia took notice. Emilia, this place is. Upon looking around, Emilia's field of vision was a story above than the time she had arrived at the first layer. The absence of the 5 pillars supposed to be in her environs was proof of her having arrived at an altitude above their apex to name. Precisely this place was the uppermost stratum. She had reached it, in the form of getting dropped off Volcanica's back. The uppermost stratum of Pleiades' watchtower, an untrodden territory, at last. Emilia, hell yeah, I did it. It was well worth working hard and persevering. With a modest reaction to the emotionally moving happenings, Emilia put her hand on her chest, and made haste towards the core of the uppermost stratum immediately. Should she act nonchalantly, the agonizing Volcanica may return. Before that occurred, she must discover the trial with the purpose of saving Subaru and the rest. Emilia, please, give me a problem that even I know the answer to. Though Volcanica, having forgotten the trial, too was a problem, what was another problem for Emilia was whether she would even be able to solve the trial of the first layer in the first place. Burying that fear, Emilia headed towards the center of the uppermost stratum. And, arriving at the base of a pillar extending to the heavens there, Emilia said and widened her eyes. There it was. A peculiarity not possessed by the 6 pillars in the floor below. There certainly it was, the enigmatic peculiarity possessed solely by the pillar in the center of this uppermost stratum. It was. Emilia, someone's handprints? The uppermost stratum of Pleiades' watchtower, what was at the base of the pillar in its center, was a black monolith. And on that black monolith, printed were handprints. 6 handprints, of respective differing men and women, had been printed. End of chapters 83 and 84, Ram.